what they're paying. This is also it's a logical fallacy. Okay, so first of all, the fact that all of the states that are run by Democrats have extraordinarily high tax burdens is not a function of an economic warfare tactic. It's a function of the way those states are governed. So you have to really unpack what he's saying, because if you just believe what he's just told you, then it sounds like not only have the Republicans found a way to punish Americans for not voting the way they wanted them to, but that they're using that as a way to reward voters in some states and punish other voters in other states. So what about all of the millions of Americans in Illinois, New York, and California who actually voted for Donald Trump? Why would he want to punish them? So that this is not about punishment, which again goes to the heart of how Democrats think. They literally think that if something does not benefit them, it's Republicans trying to punish them. Like Republicans are magical boogeymen that weren't magic during the Obama administration, but now that they're in charge and are passing some tax reform, now they're magical boogeymen and they can do anything, even flouting the Constitution. So let's just for a couple of seconds, calmly and rationally consider what this man has said. All right. So he says there are no senators from Democratic states. Of course there are. So the tax bill passed along partisan lines. So obviously some Democrats voted for it, knowing what was about to happen. So what could they do? He went on in some audio that I didn't save for the program. He said, well, the thing is, what we can do is we can sue. This is unconstitutional. We'll take this to court. Now, that's a typical remedy for the Democrats. When something happens that they don't like, they decide they're going to take it to the Ninth Circuit and let the Ninth Circuit take care of it for them. Instead of looking at what happened and saying these states have really high taxes, let's look at why. Now, yes, the cost of living is higher on the coast, but does that translate into a typical family of four paying $30,000 to $40,000, even $50,000 a year in tax, property tax, on a house that they would pay $5,000 in property tax on if it were located in the state of Missouri? So if you do a comparative analysis, they're not just paying more in tax and then getting these fantastic, almost like concierge type services. They're just paying more in tax for the privilege of living in states run by Democrats. Democrats don't want to admit that they don't know how to handle that, cutting taxes, balancing budgets, changing their pension plans, unburdening their systems by refusing to borrow money to build new things like schools and all of that. And before you attack me for saying schools and education, every 10 years, school buildings don't need to be completely overhauled and remodeled. And every building that has a bit of a vintage look to it, that doesn't mean that building can't serve students. I think you should look at the product. Are people who live in blue states getting a better deal on the educational product that they're receiving? I don't know. I would say they're probably not. I don't think they are. If you look at the stats, they're not doing a ton better than people in the Midwest as far as the educational outcomes. The schools are just more expensive. They're more expensive to run. So he says in the piece that there's always politics in the crafting of legislation, but this was an egregious, obnoxious, what the Senate is saying is we don't have any senators from the blue states. You want to hurt New York. You want to hurt California. They're the economic engines. Okay, sure. So these are economic engines of our country, but so are Midwestern states. So are Southern states. A lot of states contribute to the GDP. All of them do. So this isn't about an economic warfare tactic by the Republicans. It just isn't. Instead of him admitting that Democrats tend to want to tax more to provide more services, and that Democratic states tend to have more sanctuary cities, and that sanctuary cities tend to cost multiple tens of billions more to the states that they reside in than cities that are not sanctuary cities, he goes to this tactic. It's kind of crazy to watch. If you watch the video, and I have it on my Twitter feed, at Stacy on the right. If you watch the video, you almost feel like maybe for this interview, he's not himself, because no grown adult, no clear thinking adult would go to this argument when the truth is their taxes are too high. So they found a workaround. We'll tax the, pants off of our electorate here in the state of New York, but they can deduct those tax burdens from their federal tax burden, and that spreads it out so that other states that don't have such high tax burdens, their citizens will be taxed at a higher federal income tax rate because they don't have as much state and local tax to deduct. So when the Republicans and the reformers sat down and figured this thing out, they decided that's not fair. If you have high state taxes and you like that, then pay them and, bite the bullet and own what you've got. And if you don't have high state taxes, and you want your state taxes to be higher, by all means, elect people who do that for you. I don't know anybody in their right mind who would admit that. I don't know any Democrats who aren't heavily partisan who would openly say, yes, I want to pay more in tax. I don't want to get anything extra for it. I just want to pay more in tax because I want to make sure I'm paying the same amount as someone in New York or Illinois or someplace like that. So this is the game. When we look at what's going on with these politicians, this is the game. Going into 2018, this is going to be part of their milieu, if you will. They're going to bring forward this idea that somehow the Republicans have effectively launched economic warfare on Americans in blue states. Now, never mind that, because these are heavily populated states, but never mind that there are multiple tens of millions of Americans in other states that aren't blue who are going to look at that and go, wait a second. So you're saying my senator sat down in a room and said, I want to wage war on my constituents' relatives who might live in California or New York. There's no way anybody's going to buy that, you guys. No way clear-thinking Americans aren't going to see this for what it is. The Democrats are in a tailspin. This tax reform bill is probably not just the biggest legislative achievement of the year, but it's the biggest trick move ever played on them. We'll be back with more right after this. Stay there.
Isn't that a beautiful sound? The Sonogram holds the sound of a baby's heartbeat. Hi, I'm Will Addison, Director of Urban Family Talk. We are partnering with the Ministry of Preborn to help save babies' lives. Preborn partners with pregnancy centers throughout America in helping abortion-minded women choose life through ultrasound. By letting a mother hear her baby's heartbeat and see her baby in her womb, she will choose life 80% of the time. Ultrasound is a game changer. For $140, you can provide 5 ultrasounds. All gifts are tax deductible, and 100% of your gift goes to saving babies. You can save a baby's life right here in America by donating to Preborn. To donate, dial pound 250 and
Script of today's thoughts by Crawford, go to livingalegacy.org.
Welcome back to the program, everybody. It's good to be with you on a Thursday. Who else is, if you're off right now, you're wondering what day it is? I had to ask one of the kids this morning. I'm like, what day is it? Because they're off for weeks and weeks and weeks. Their school built in this huge vacation time for Christmas. And we're at a new school this fall. And so I'm like, wow, guys, you're still off? You're still off? So anyway, they're now hanging out, reading, playing video games, watching movies. And I was trying to figure out what day it was. And so I know it's Thursday, and I'm really glad to be back on the radio and to be kind of working through this cold. You guys heard the fiasco from yesterday. I was like coughing my neck off. So right now it's my pleasure to welcome a wonderful friend of mine and of the Stacy on the Right show. He's an author, pro-life activist, a documentarian, and host of the CL Bryant show. CL Bryant, thank you so much for coming on today.
Stacy Washington, it is my absolute pleasure to join you on your show. Thank you for having me.
You know, it's always so much fun to talk to you, but this is especially going to be a treat for me because this is the end of the year. And I've asked you to come on today, CL, to kind of break down what just happened to us this year as Americans, as conservatives. Also, there are Democrats who listen to the show, obviously. As people who care about public policy, what happened to us this year?
I believe that there has been an awakening in America, Stacy, unlike that which has occurred, not unlike that which occurred to us back in the 60s. I think there has been not only a spiritual awakening, there's a social awakening that has occurred as well. And people like yourself have been very instrumental in causing that awakening. There is a rebirth, unsuspecting to us because of the election of this president, someone who seemingly was not the type of person who would cause that type of leadership and strength in our country today. I think black people in particular will find that there is opportunity in embracing once again who we are as Americans and the price that was paid for us to enjoy the full fruits of Americanism, which is not a bad word. There has been a renewing of Christian liberty in this country. And I think that soldiers and warriors like yourself and mine, self and others who join us in this fight, too, have brought about this great awakening again in America.
And you know what, CL, I'm so glad you brought out that religious freedom aspect. It's not about any of us saying, oh, you know, we got to have a religious test, or we need everyone who serves in government to be a Christian, or we need the President of the United States to be a Christian. We've never advocated for a theocratic rule or anything like that. We're just talking about the kinds of freedoms that were enshrined in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights that have been under attack under the Obama administration. And I think it was kind of interesting that President Obama played both sides of that coin so well. He would say, I'm a Christian, you know, I'm just like you. And then he would attack Christianity. He would attack the faith moorings of our country. He would attack nuns, you know, people that you would traditionally think of as off limits for political warfare. He would go right after them. And then right after that, he'd say, you know, God bless America, and I believe in God, and I'm a Christian too.
Right. And you know, Stacy, I know that you are a Christian unashamedly, so am I, and we join many others with that. With embracing that. But you're very familiar with what God told Joshua after the death of Moses when he was about to possess the land. He said, you're well able to do it, but you must be very strong and courageous. And that is something I'm seeing in this particular administration, at least in the president. We did not quite see strong and courageous in the last administration. And sometimes it takes the wisdom of God to confound the things that men consider to be wise. And the foolishness, I think, of what we have been engaged in over the last 8 years, the last 9 years, I think has finally been broken in a way that progressive liberals are scurrying in every aspect of the word to hold on to. But because of a show of strength and a show of courage, that we do not have to march to the drum of the things that tear down the fiber that built this country, I believe that we are all benefiting from the show of strength and the show of courage in the leader that God has allowed now to possess the office of president.
I agree. I'm looking forward to 2018, and I'm thinking about President Trump, and I'm one of those. I'm a realist, CL. You know this. I come on your program sometimes, and when we talk, I'm a realist. I don't want to waste my time, kind of laying back and thinking, what I wish, and then kind of thinking that has any impact on what's about to happen. Like what I wish the president would do and what I kind of forecast that he will do based on his past actions, those are two different things. And so when I look forward to 2018, I'm hoping that he'll continue to grow in Christ. Last year it was reported that he became a Bible-believing Christian and that he has Bible study in the White House once a week, and he and his wife are attending church. And I expect that those things will have a marked change on him. But as he governs a nation that is filled with all kinds of believers and non-believers, I think there's kind of a difficult dance that he has to kind of engage in. Do you forecast for 2018 any specific moves that kind of prove that, he's walking as a new Christian, or do you see him kind of holding that back?
Yes. As you know, I have met with the president on 3 different occasions. In fact, I interviewed him starting out to meet, when I first met him. I interviewed him about three and a half years ago, before he announced that he was looking to be president of the United States. And by the way, folks, Stacy will be on the CL Bryant show tomorrow, high noon, coast to coast over Red State Talk Radio, and I'm always glad to have her on. But Stacy, to answer your question, I do believe that there is a move of our God, as Thomas Jefferson referred to as the Creator, and the endowment that we have as Americans will be very strongly seen in 2018. The reason I feel so confident in that is that when we look at this president and the types of people that he has around him, faith leaders that he does invite around him, we have to understand that in order for him to have become president, it was a miraculous thing. You had 5 living presidents who were against him. And in some instances, his own party was against him. The Clinton machine was against him. And even up until election night, the country was not certain at all that Donald Trump would defeat that Clinton machine. And when we wake up the following morning and we realize that Donald Trump has, in fact, overcome all obstacles and all odds of becoming president of the United States, giving us an opportunity for a stay of execution, I think, of the judgment of God, we have to understand that God must be giving us a reprieve.
Well, I see a reprieve there, but let's talk about that real quickly, because we still have some more time here, and I'm so glad that you are covering that, because here on the program, I often will talk about the different ways we as Christians, Bible-believing Christians, can kind of worry about ourselves. And so we want to be involved in politics. We want to render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, but we also have to be primarily concerned with our own salvation and walking that out. So when we see a reprieve for the nation, as you describe it, then what? Because a lot of people are like, okay, woohoo, the economy is booming, business is back. Now I can kind of just, get back to the regular business of everyday life and stop worrying so much about politics. But I kind of feel like it's the opposite. Like, this is a really dangerous time for us because we still have a lot of work to do.
Yes, indeed, we do, particularly in the family. If, in fact, we are to be the people that we were intended to be, there has to be a boon that happened much like after World War II. Believe it or not, we were wrestling against so many principalities and rulers of darkness and high places in the last 9 years, as the FBI fiasco and all of that has proven to us. I think now it is time for Americans to understand that what we were founded to be was the light to the world, a city that is set up on a hill, whose light should not be hid, that we are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its savor, Stacy, then it is good for nothing but to be cast out and trodden under the foot of men. The reprieve that I talk about is to rediscover who we are in our definition of Americans and why God allowed us through it all, through the slavery, through the dark days until this present moment, why God has allowed us to continue to exist as the Judeo-Christian nation that we were founded to be. There's reason for that, and America has a chance now to rediscover that, and this president has opened the door for that rediscovery.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's rediscovery, but let's just talk real quick about all of there's this black liberation theology that took root before President Obama ever was something we knew about, but has now metastasized, and it's worked its way out of the black church and is now moving through other denominations. And it really places skin color and ethnicity above a sovereign God who cares for us intimately and wants a personal relationship with us. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because I see the opportunity there, but I think a lot of people have been deceived.
Oh, absolutely. And the reason why so many young people leave the church is because they have no reason as far as why they are Christians. There is no practicality in it. If it's just to be black, if it's just to celebrate the emotion instead of celebrating something that is a vehicle to not only prosperity here, but the future, then it's worthless. And black liberation theology brings into the conversation the idea of multiculturalism, which the black church bought into. I've pastored 3 churches in my 40 years of the pastoral ministry, from California to Florida. I've seen it very rampant. I've been a missionary in Brazil and even down the Amazon, and black liberation theology is very big in South America. In fact, it has beginnings in Latin America. And when we look at the poisoning, the blood poisoning of the Christian bloodstream here in America, even the Catholic Church, not only the black church, but the Catholic Church, is rife with liberation theology. And black liberation theology in particular is something that is so subtle. It's like a serpent. It is right there, and it is strangling and has strangled the black church over a period of time. And black preachers have allowed themselves, not all of them, but many of them, have allowed themselves to be co-opted by those who have used them to lead a group of people to a place where they are spiritually confused and they are politically confused along with their spirituality. And so it is time now for that bell to be rung. It's time for that conversation to be had. And it's time for folks like you and I to have that conversation with America.
Well, I'm ready. And I think we're doing that now. You're doing that on the radio on Red State. We're doing that here. And I think it's also when we're other places, when you are meeting with, the president of the United States or then the candidate or what have you, when you're in these spaces and we're sharing what we feel to be what's on our heart, the truth, and some solutions, I think that goes a long way. And we just have to continue to pray and continue to lift up these situations as well as speaking the truth, because it kills me when I hear these lies being propagated on the media and people are believing it. There's no counter to it unless they can find their way to a program like yours or something here on Urban Family Talk, what we're doing. And so it's crazy to me that we have this problem, but there is a solution, and it's always Jesus Christ.
Absolutely. Jesus, the name above all names, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. I am so glad. I don't know about anybody else. I do believe I know about you, but I don't know about anybody else. But as for me, I am so glad that he did pay the ultimate sacrifice for us to come boldly before him in this fashion. and cast our cares at his feet, because he cares for us. And thank you so much, Stacy, for having me on with you. God bless you, and God keep you. And I trust everybody will go to and follow me on Twitter at CL Bryant, CL Bryant, or go to my website, theclbryantshow.com. You can find everything you want to know right there. Thank you.
Oh, perfect. Thank you for giving us all of those sites so we can follow you. I already follow him on Twitter. I'll tweet him over the break so that you guys can quickly connect up with him. And we just appreciate everything that you're doing. And I'm so grateful for you and the work that you've been doing. Thank you, CL.
Thank you. Bye now.
All right, bye. I'll talk to you tomorrow. So we will have more after these messages. I want to kind of give you a preview for tomorrow's show. And we talked about some of the things that we were wishing for. And so we will have, when we get back, we're going to have some time. Oh, actually, we have our next guest, John LeBoutillier, who's going to be on the next guest. But think up some of the things that you're hoping that you're going to see from the president in 2018. And we'll talk about that in the next segment. So top of the hour, when we come back, we'll have calls, and you can call in at 866-963-2037 and weigh in on some of the things that you think would be great to see from President Trump. And I'm mainly looking at his agenda. I'm not looking for him to do extra stuff. I'm looking for him to do what he promised. And so we also have Anna Masoglia, DC analyst. She's been on the show a ton, great friend of the show. She'll be on tomorrow with us, and we'll have other guests that I'll let you know about. But for now, we're going to go to the break, and when we get back, we'll have more Stacy on the Right. You guys can see me as the guests are talking, sipping this super hot tea and the icy cold orange juice. Yes, I'm working this thing down to the ground. All right, we'll be right back.
What does it take to live an uncommon life? Here's former Super Bowl winning coach Tony Dungy with today's uncommon moment.
Press on, move ahead. Forget what's behind, whether it's good or bad. Yesterday is done and gone. That was one of the things I always tried to impress upon my teams. No matter what happened on game day, even if it was a devastating last-second loss, by the next night they had to let it go. Focusing on last week's game would not help them prepare for the next one. Where are you today in your journey with Christ? Are you stuck in the past, holding on to grudges, regrets, or feelings of guilt? Release your past by giving it to Christ and press on to reach the heavenly prize of being in His presence forever.
Tony Dungy, author of the popular Uncommon book series. Discover more at CoachDungy.com. That's CoachDungy.com.
Please call your senators today. It's time to put an end to the liberals' filibuster. Tell your senators to switch to a majority vote and defund Planned Parenthood now. Call the Capitol Switchboard at 202-224-3121 or go to afaaction.net. Again, call 202-224-3121 and tell your senators to switch to a majority vote and defund Planned Parenthood. Your call will make a difference.
Who is today's urban woman?
Today's urban woman is about empowering herself, empowering her family to empower our future. We have a wealth of opportunities here in America. There are no excuses. Everyone should be able to empower themselves, educate themselves, and be stewards of our society. Today's urban woman, here to stay, and we're moving forward, never looking backward. I'm Deneen Borelli, and I am today's urban woman.
The Capital One commercial will forever be etched in the ear of the listener. What's in your wallet is a phrase that won't easily be forgotten. But this is not a Capital One plug. I want you to think about the people that are in your circle of influence. Who's in your circle is my new catchphrase, simply because we don't think enough about the people or spirits that we allow into our personal space. Negativity is contagious and fatal. Misery loves company, and it's fatal to your hopes and dreams. I think we all know someone who, no matter what good has happened, always has something negative to say. Ugh, that really bothers me. That bad attitude and that pessimistic spirit will only cause you to do the same. There's no room for doubt, especially if you're believing God to bring that vision to fruition. Now, this is not a license for you to be mean. It is, however, a license for you to assess who's in your circle and make the necessary adjustments. With a heart for the urban family, I'm today's urban woman, Tony Johnson. Connect with us at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Sometimes I wonder if you're really listening, or if all of my words are just leaving my mouth floating up in the air. I've been told that I'm crazy, putting all of my faith into the arms of somebody.
So, welcome back to the program, everybody. It's great to be with you. Follow me on Twitter at Stacy on the Right, StacyOnTheRight.com, and you'll find all the cool stuff if you do that. And a little bit of an update for people who ordered mugs. Yes, so I had an issue with the shipper. I ordered two kinds of mugs. One is an 11-ounce mug, and then there's a 15-ounce mug, which is the one you see me drink out of a lot on the show. And so it's really big. And so when I finally went around to opening up all of the boxes of the mugs, I only had the 11-ounce mugs. They're fantastic, but if you paid for the larger mug, then that is what I'm supposed to send you. So those are actually going out today. So if you've emailed me about those, I'll update you with the tracking number. I've printed out my labels and stuff, and you should be getting notifications from PayPal that you have something on the way to you. I apologize for that, but when I let them know, they actually had to make me new mugs, which they then had to mail to me. And that was a bit of the holdup. So part on me, part on them. But either way, you're going to have those shortly. So in addition to that, it's my pleasure to welcome Congressman John LeBoutillier to come on and talk with us a little bit about the Democrats and the Republicans and 2017. John, thank you so much for coming on.
Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. Great to be on. How are you?
Oh, Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. I'm loving everyone saying Merry Christmas. Even when I'm out shopping, if I say Merry Christmas, the people say it back now, which is different. That is totally different.
Well, that's good, because we shouldn't back down in saying what we believe, and if it makes us feel good, we ought to say it.
Exactly.
It doesn't hurt anybody's feelings. It was ridiculous. Politically correct is ridiculous.
I agree. So let's talk about this. We've got the congressional Democrats and Republicans, and we've got this whole year where we've seen the Democrats be quite effective in blocking legislation by the Republicans until the tax reform bill, which for us to have had waited as long as we had to, it certainly is better than we thought it was going to be. It's turned out very well, actually.
Yeah, but the fact is, it wasn't the Democrats who blocked us all year until the tax bill, because Republicans run both the House and the Senate. It's the fact that Republicans are a very divided party, and I am a Republican. We're a divided party, and we couldn't even agree with each other to repeal Obamacare. Democrats really had nothing to do with it. We knew they were going to be against it. We made no effort all year to recruit Democrats to vote for anything. Because we run both houses, we thought we could do whatever we wanted. But the Republican Party has a major problem between Tea Party Republicans and mainstream Republicans. They really are only together as Republicans, but not on most issues. And that's a real problem. Democrats are united in opposition, but Republicans are divided even though we're in the majority.
So let's kind of unpack that a little bit. When we look at what you just described, which I've kind of run into on this program, I've raved and ranted about it. I've been upset about the Republicans really not being able to say, get into a room, get around a conference table and say, okay, we have some differences here, but in the long run, we're in power, and there have to be some things that we can agree on that we want to get passed and done while we're in charge, and so let's work on those. Why can't they do that?
Well, they did on the tax one. That's the one thing they were in agreement on, and all 52 Republicans voted for it in the Senate, although McCain couldn't vote because he was sick, but he said he would vote for it. So we had all of them. We lost 11 in the House, including my congressman up here, who's a good Republican, but because of the tax deductibility issue of state and local taxes, known as SALT, state and local taxes, SALT. We lost 11 Republicans, which is okay. We had a margin, so we could get away. We have a margin of 23. So we were okay with that. But, you know, on most issues, I'll tell you, the Freedom Caucus, for instance, is very big on debt and not running up the debt, and they don't want to vote for things that will run up the debt, and they won't vote for certain things, which is their right. But you can get them around a table all you want. They will not compromise on that, and it makes us unable to pass many things. And you're going to see this more this coming 2018 with elections coming up again. I don't think we're going to get much done this year.
Okay, so I got really mad when I heard Mitch McConnell say that, and now you're saying that. So since I like you more than I like Mitch McConnell, and I don't really dislike him, but he's not my favorite, I'll go ahead and accept that. So what we have to focus on then is messaging. We have to say as Republicans, look at what we've been able to accomplish. Look at what these accomplishments are doing for you as tax-paying Americans. And if you want more of that, you have to leave us in charge. Otherwise, the Democrats will undo everything that we've done.
Well, that's a good message. I agree with that. It would be nice if we would pass some more stuff that we believe in this coming year. We're going to have trouble just passing a budget. We did these continuing resolutions, which keep funding the government at current levels. But other things that we want to do, like increase the defense budget, even that is difficult to do, and that's with us having full power. This is harder than people realize to get a majority of people in the House and Senate to vote for things.
That's ridiculous. So you actually sent over a link to a piece that we've covered here, and I actually called for this on Twitter and online everywhere. I'm one of the Americans, and I believe there are millions others like myself, who want to know who harassed people and made payouts on behalf of taxpayers. So in other words, who have I paid to be in Congress who's sexually harassed people or racially discriminated against people or whatever? Who are these people, and when do I get to learn their names? Can you help me out with that, or is that a pipe dream?
No, you're 100% right. So here's what we know. Since this whole thing with Harvey Weinstein blew this issue wide open, and people are being fired by the minute in TV news and Hollywood and everywhere, it has come out that in the early 1990s, there was a congressional fund, and I've heard two numbers, either $15 or $17 million was made available, from which they would pay out victims of sexual harassment up on Capitol Hill. That's all we know. We don't know who did the harassing. We don't know what they did. It could be congressmen, or it could be senior staff harassing subordinates. And when there were complaints, they paid these people off out of that money. And that's your money and my money and your listeners' money, and we have a right to know. We don't necessarily have a right to know who got the money, but we certainly have a right to know which elected officials who work for us and are paid for by us, who they were, what they did, how much was paid, and they need to be punished for it. And the way you get punished is in the next election by having this be an issue. And I think as 2018 begins, I think we're going to find this out. And my guess is, and I don't know anything inside or anything, but my guess is there are more victims, there are more congressmen who did this than we can imagine.
So do you think we're going to find that it's more Democrats doing the harassing, or are we going to find this as an equal opportunity problem? Because no one wants to have this as an election issue, because everyone's afraid that it will decimate their chances for the Democrats taking back the two houses, the two chambers of Congress, and for the Republicans maintaining.
Yeah. It's not a partisan issue. The Republicans and Democrats are equal opportunity harassers. Both parties have people in it that are leches, and they need to be exposed and rooted out of there. And I think they will.
But so I agree. I think it's something that is a human failing. It doesn't, fall along party lines. And I do want to know who these people are. But what are our actual real life chances? I'm a realist. I think it's fantastic to talk about it. I want to know the answers. I feel like as a taxpayer, I have a right. If it's in the public files, if it's a part of our government, we have a right to know, unless it's been classified because of national security or something like that. Obviously, this information would not fall under national security. They're all Americans. So how do we go about getting the information?
Well, I think that us talking about it, the press pushing for it up in Washington, that ultimately it will come out. It has to. If it's not formally turned over by Congress, then it will be leaked out. Now, we've already had, 5 or 6 members have quit or announced they're not running again. And I find it hard to believe. They're counting the Senate and the House together, there are 535 members of Congress. And that was early 1990s, this fund was set up. So that's 25 years ago. So 25 years with 535 members, this is some turnover. So over 25 years, there have probably been 1,000 members of Congress, maybe. It's impossible to believe that out of 1,000 members of Congress, there's only been 5 or 6 of them who did this. I mean, no way. There's a lot of them.
Well, not for 15 million.
It's going to come out.
Yeah. So you've got the number as well. You've got the number of individuals possible, and then you've got the number that was paid out. And so all of the payouts weren't $1 million apiece. So there have to have been numerous payouts over the 25 years. I think some of the people, obviously, they're not there anymore. For whatever reason, they didn't run again. They lost their elections, what have you. So they're gone. But it's not really an issue of trying to find out who they are so they can be punished again or, be punished initially for something that happened 10 or 15 years ago. It's that instead of them using their congressional, funds they've raised, or instead of them going to donors and saying, I've got a problem, I need to take some of my campaign funds, or I need to raise some additional funds to do something with this, or taking some of their private wealth, because a number of these individuals have become wealthy over the course of their time in Congress. Instead of that, you've just got them saying, look, let's set aside a taxpayer slush fund, which unsurprisingly was stood up underneath President Clinton with all of his, myriad of wrongdoings and while he was in office. And then they started using the taxpayer funds as if they were their own funds. That's my problem with this.
Well, you're right. You should have a problem with it. And even if they're out of government now, we still have a right to know that when they worked for us and used our money, what did they do and how much of it did they spend? And the only thing I would want to protect are the women or whoever the victims are. There could be men victims, I don't know. But the victims don't need to be punished by being disclosed. But the member of Congress or the member of the staff that did because I think some of this is senior staff people, like the chief of staff up on the Hill, that used to be called an administrative assistant. Usually guys, they did all the hiring in your office. They had the power over the day-to-day workings of the staff. The congressman is off flying around his or her district. They're not running the office day-to-day, usually. And the senior staff guys are. And therefore, they had the ability to exert power over underlings and women and so forth. So that may be where some of the payouts went, but they work for us too. So we have a right to know all of it, except the victims. I don't want to hurt the victims again.
Yeah, I'm not really interested in who received the payouts. To be honest with you, some of these cases are going to be so old that even any kind of contact with the people who receive the payouts is like, reopening a wound that is basically, you don't even have a scar left. It's gone. It's something that they've put behind them. But if we aren't able to get the names of the people who did the payouts, that means this can be done again. And I know Paul Ryan said he's, brought forward a bill there will be no more payouts or whatever it is that he said the way he's going to stop this from happening. But that doesn't mean future administrations won't attempt to do the same thing and actually be able to do it because there was no sunlight.
Also, I'm just thinking as we're talking about it, as a congressman, you have a budget that's for staff and travel and all, and then you're on a committee, and if you're the head of the committee or a subcommittee, there's a whole other budget there. I wouldn't be surprised if we're going to learn that money was taken from one account and moved over to another and used to pay off women. I think this happens in all other businesses. It had to have happened up in Capitol Hill, and it's got to be found out, and it will be.
Well, I'm so glad that we have you on board and that you were able to take the time out to come and be with us today. Thank you for your time, Congressman LeBoutillier. Fantastic to talk with you, and Happy New Year to you. All right, talk again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll be back with Hour 2 of Stacy on the right after these messages. Stay there.
Family Talk.
I'm Will Addison, Director of Urban Family Talk. Do you believe that we are living in the last days? In the culture we live in today, and dare I say even in our church culture, we are guilty of not looking towards Christ's return, but are in fact bogged down with the cares of this world. Do you find yourself more concerned about this world than you are about the world to come? Be encouraged to live as if Christ is coming back today. Stay connected at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. Bitter cold is gripping a large area of the country. In Maine, a wind chill advisory is in effect as the gusts are making it dangerously cold in the state. Fox 23 Maine's Adam Epstein has more.
This is what it's going to feel like. Anywhere from 19 below in Portland to 22 below in Augusta. And there's actually a wind chill warning in Oxford and Franklin counties. Rangeley is going to feel like 36 degrees below zero. That is downright frigid, truly icebox temperatures. And then in the afternoon on Thursday, you'd expect it to get a little bit better, maybe, but really not much. Just about 11 below in Lewiston, 8 below in Augusta, and feeling like negatives throughout the whole day.
For the next 5 days, Portland will not reach temperatures above 13 degrees, but the lows dip to 11 below without counting the wind chill. President Trump is hoping to keep the legislative momentum going in the new year. John Decker has more.
In an effort to get a head start on his 2018 legislative agenda, President Trump plans to open the new year by meeting with the Hill's top Republicans. The White House says the president will host Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and House Speaker Paul Ryan at Camp David during the weekend of January 6th. Among the items the president intends to pursue in 2018, an infrastructure spending bill and welfare reform. The president last week signed a tax overhaul bill that cuts taxes for corporations and individuals, his first major legislative achievement for 2017. At the White House, John Decker, Fox News.
The terrorist group Islamic State, also known as ISIS, is claiming responsibility for a deadly bombing in Kabul, Afghanistan. Greg Palcott has the story from London.
Yet another nasty incident in Afghanistan, ISIS again claiming responsibility. A Shiite Muslim cultural center in Kabul, the target of the Afghanistan ISIS spin-off group. A suicide bomber walked right into the center of a gathering there, leaving a scene of death and destruction. Other explosions were set around the outside of the building. The latest figures, 41 killed, 84 wounded. Shiite targets have been increasingly hit by the Sunni extremist ISIS. There was also a pro-Iran news agency based there. That country also a target of the group. ISIS in Afghanistan was started in 2015. It is growing in strength as its strength is fading elsewhere in the region. Between ISIS and Taliban, Afghanistan remains a very dangerous place. In London, Greg Palcott, Fox News.
There's been a lot of talk about the latest enrollment numbers for Obamacare, but Chris Woodward reports on what has not been discussed.
According to the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, 8.8 million people enrolled in Obamacare plans between November 1st and December 15th.
welfare benefits, looking at these programs, looking at the verification process for entering into these programs, and working on how you go about with these benefits being given out. And I think that giving more of this responsibility to the states, to social workers that are in the counties that know how to verify, know families, know who is truly in need. This is how we're going to get a handle on making certain that the programs and the benefits are going to the people who qualify and who need these benefits.
Welcome to Stacy on the Right, everybody. Pardon me for the throat clearing. I have a cold, but I'm back on the air after a week off, and what a fantastic and blessed Christmas it was, and so wonderful to be with family and to just unplug for a whole week. I missed you guys. I missed being on the radio. And so now that I'm back and we've had a slammin' and jammin' show, just been rocking and rolling through the first hour. And now we're back and we've got, there's just a whole lot more to get into this hour. Our guest for this hour will be Celeste Katz. She's a senior political reporter for Newsweek, and she's going to be coming on to talk current events and news of the day. You were just listening to Representative Marsha Blackburn, and she was going over, this is so fascinating, the whole entitlement reform process, because that's something that has to happen. So we have tax cuts, and everybody loves tax cuts. I'm the primary cheerleader for tax cuts. I'm out ahead of cheerleading for the tax cuts, so please know that. But what else, right? What else is the deal here? Well, we got to have entitlement reform. And the reason we have to have entitlement reform is that when you cut taxes, according to the Democrats, you lose revenue. But according to conservative orthodoxy, the reason you can cut taxes is because you're shrinking government. You're not shrinking the functions of government. You're not shrinking the constitutional mandates that are inherent to what the government does. Nope. But what you are doing is you're saying some of this stuff isn't constitutionally mandated. Some of this stuff isn't a part of the purview of government. And so entitlements, while we want to have a safety net, while we admit as conservatives that the Great Depression was so great, if you will, because there weren't any systems in place to take care of people who all of a sudden your farmland is now a dust bowl and the economy has collapsed and there's just nothing that people can do. So we had people starving to death. I mean, it was terrible. We don't want that. But we also don't want fat, well-fed, iPhoned up, completely digitally and electronically connected, layabout individuals wolled up on third, fourth, and fifth generational welfare entitlement programs, living off of the backs of hardworking Americans, some of whom have more than one job. As someone who has more than one job, I don't appreciate it. I don't appreciate knowing that some people are eating lobster and they don't work. It's fine if you eat lobster. I eat it. It's not about me having something against it. You should just buy your own. You buy your own lobster. So you buy your own alcohol, your own cigarettes, whatever it is that you're doing, you buy it for yourself. The taxpayer shouldn't be doing that for you. So one of the things that is important for us to consider is that the Republicans, so it makes you unpopular when you talk about that. So just right now, there's somebody in the audience who's like, who does she think she is? We're talking about taking care of the poor. I have no problem with taking care of the poor. That's a biblical mandate. It doesn't say the government should take care of the poor. It says we should as Christians. Now, how that gets done, that's debatable. But there are people sitting out there right now who just heard what I said, who are hopping mad because they think I want to throw innocent children off of programs. I don't care anything about disenfranchising individuals who can't take care of themselves. The poor, legitimately poor, and yes, I said legitimately poor. If you don't understand how much welfare fraud there is, how many people out there who are receiving benefits for relatives who've passed away, but they never filed the death certificate with the Social Security Administration, so they're still getting checks for their dead relatives. If you don't understand how many people out there who have EBT cards and they also work, they work off book, so they're doing hair, they're doing nails, they're doing whatever kind of service industry they can do. Those people are also receiving welfare benefits. So there's a lot that goes into this. It's not just, hey, cut those people off, cut everybody off at the knees, and let's see where things fall out. That's not it. We've had Christina Rabali on the program when she was working with FGA. FGA goes into these states, goes into the states and says, listen, your welfare policy is good. It takes care of indigent, the people who are, disabled. It takes care of people who are down on their luck and they're in between jobs. But it also punishes people who are working their way out of that situation. So the FGA would show these local state governments how to just slightly tweak and restructure their programs to make it so that they can help people and wean them off of government assistance without crushing their will to make a living. So this is a part of entitlement reform. And I wonder why we as Republicans, as people of the right, conservatives, people who believe in limited government, can't explain that in a way that makes sense to Americans. Because I've heard plenty of Democrats, they're not on television when they say these things. These are just regular Democrats, people who vote for the Democrats. Yes, they're real life Democrats that I've heard say too many people are on welfare, too many people are receiving welfare benefits. So if a regular person who's a Democrat can look at the situation and say there are people abusing the system and they should be thrown off and this system should be reformed so that fewer people can abuse it and so that people who really need it can use it. And if I as a conservative can say amen to that, I agree, and there's no room between us on that issue, then what's the problem? Why can't we have people in government say, listen, this is the lay of the land. We have some people who are legitimately in need of government services, and we want to be there for them 110%. But we want to be there for them in a way that enables them to eventually work their way off of entitlement programs. Now, for someone who's permanently disabled, that's a whole different ballgame. But I'm not talking about those people. So what the Democrats have been very effective in doing is taking this situation and saying, well, the Republicans want to throw grandma off a cliff. And then they actually make a commercial where Paul Ryan is pushing some grandmother off of a cliff in a wheelchair. And people actually watch that and believe it. When what Paul Ryan was advocating for was what I just described just now, just then. That's all he was advocating for. Only he was using raw budget numbers because he went through the budget line by line, a paper copy, and he studied it for years. He spent years inside the budget of the federal government trying to map out ways, working with civic leaders, not-for-profit leaders, people in the community, talking about, look, this is what this funding looks like. But what does it look like in operation in your community? This is what this line item says. It says this many billions of dollars go to this. But what is the impact in your community? He did that work. And then in repayment for that work, Democrats said he's a granny killer, and Americans bought it. Now, I know not all Americans are rocket scientists. I get it. But we should all be able to understand the concept of wanting people to work if they want to eat. So if you're disabled and you cannot, then that's not a part of this equation. But everybody can contribute something if they're expecting to get a check from the government, which we've also gone over on this program. Remember the episode where I went down all of the different states? I found a breakdown of all the states, what their welfare package is worth. Hawaii, it's worth $68,000 a year to be on welfare, full benefits. $68,000 a year is more than $10,000 more than the median income of a family four in this country. And that's a lot. So let's listen to cut two.
I think the Democrats are not going to be interested in entitlement reform, so I would not expect to see that on the agenda. And what the Democrats are willing to do is important because in the Senate, with rare exceptions like the tax bill, we have to have Democratic involvement.
So could you get Democratic involvement in this? No.
I think you can get Democrat involvement in some of this. Absolutely. Because what are the American people interested in? Same thing Tennesseans are interested in. Truth, fairness, stability, consistency in these programs. And making certain
property owners and people in the government owe something to people who are on these programs. And that's just simply not the case. A safety net is not something that's owed to you. It's something that's there just in case you fall, to prevent you from completely collapsing out of the system to a place where you can't get back. It's not there as something that is owed to you that you can demand and you can bully the people who are administering it. That's not the purpose of it. So when we're looking at ways that we can make better change, that we can make better choices with this, we have to be able to articulate what it is that we'd like to see. And there are a lot of people out there who've done a great job of doing that, who have literally written books about what entitlement reform looks like. The Heritage Foundation has tons of white papers on the positive impacts of entitlement reform, not just on our bottom line, like the budget and things like that, but the positive impacts of entitlement reform on people, how entitlement reform actually can change the lives of people and make them happier, make them healthier, and put them on a pathway towards success that they otherwise wouldn't be able to access. That's the situation. So one of the things that has to happen going into 2018, maybe we need some kind of a boot camp. Maybe we need some kind of a way for government legislators, public servants, if you will, to learn how to talk about this so they can go out and carry that message out to the public so we can get the buy-in that we need. Because it has to happen. We can't cut taxes and keep spending like, buckets are going out of style. We can't do that. All right, when we get back, we'll have Celeste Katz and more Stacy on the right. Stay there. Welcome back to the program, everybody. Thank you so much for being here today. StacyOnTheRight.com is the website. And we're just hurtling towards the new year. We have so much going on. And that's why it's always a pleasure to speak with our next guest, who brings her unique perspective from SiriusXM Radio, where she's a host, and Newsweek, senior political reporter for Newsweek, Celeste Katz. Thank you so much for coming on today, Celeste. Uh-oh. Okay. But we do have a caller. That's my fault, you guys. We do have a caller. We'll talk to Celeste momentarily. The caller is Chris from Mississippi. Hey, welcome to Stacy on the Right.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm all right, and I just want to tell you that I really enjoy your show, even though you're filling for other people. I really enjoy it. I love your perspective.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And I just want to make a comment about the welfare reform.
Sure.
Now, I'm from the deep south, so a lot of people down here know poverty pretty well, but there's a fine line between poverty and not having what you want. Just because you don't have a refrigerator full of food does not mean it's good. And that's the biggest issue, especially with young black people, is they think because they don't have everything they want, then they're poor and somebody should give it to them. Here's my perspective. Now, I work very hard for the money that I do have. And sometimes, no, I cannot go out and feel safe. But that's fine, though, because I can still eat. But my question is, how can you walk around with the latest technology and the latest shoes and the latest accessories, but you're on welfare? That part right there, I will never understand. And people, they cut me down when I say that. But you're taking from me and the average American who doesn't want welfare, who doesn't want unemployment. We want to work. That's what we do.
Well, sure. I mean, I think a lot of people do want to work, but I think a lot of people are maybe stuck in a rut where they've been getting welfare and they've been kind of taught that as a way of life by family members. And so they're not really out there looking for an opportunity to get off of it. They're looking for other ways to maximize what they can get. That's not everyone, but that is a part of the problem.
Yes, ma'am. I agree with that 100%. And in most cases, the people really don't need the welfare. But for the people who actually do need help, I have no problem with them getting the help that they need. I have no problem with that. But most of them don't really need the help. They just do it. They get free phones. You get a utility check. If you have a car, you get gas vouchers. You get 3 minutes for your cell phone. You get free food. It bothers me when I look at it. Not the not the system. It's the individual that's taking advantage of it. And I'm not a Democrat or Republican, but I'm a conservative guy. So a lot of things that I buy, I use them for a long period of time because I take care of it. It's because I don't want to have to go out and spend money when I don't have to. And for the people that are wrong to me on welfare and just messing the system over, then I think that they need to do a welfare reform. And for this administration to even speak on that says a lot, because there are a lot of jobs out here. There are a lot of jobs, and the unemployment rate is going down further and further and further. So if you don't have a job, it's because you don't want one.
All right, now, because you're getting into. You said you're a conservative. I can hear it coming out. That's the kind of talk that gets leftists. They get triggered when they hear that because they're like, "Well, you don't know the circumstances for people." Well, the circumstances are that life is hard, and sometimes you have to go through the hard parts of it for quite a while before you get to where you want to be. And I agree with you. It enrages me. You see people running around the mall and they have, amazing. This is something that I've seen with my own two eyes. You can bump into somebody. This has happened to me on more than one occasion where you bump into somebody and you're at the mall or at some shopping place. And then later on, you're at the grocery store and you bump into that same person and they're in the line using an EBT card.
Yes,
they are literally dressed better than you and they're using an EBT card and they're buying a whole lot of stuff with the EBT card, like the basics. And then after that, they have a second order that's nothing but liquor and, things that the EBT card won't cover. And they're buying that. Now, I have no problem with you buying whatever you want, but that's the taxpayer dollars right there. And so you can dress however you want, and you can look like $1 million dressing out of the thrift store. I know a woman who does it. She dresses like $1 million, and she never buys anything brand new, only from thrift stores and eBay. So I know it can happen, but for the most part, that's not what's happening here, is it?
Oh, man.
Yeah, we need entitlement reform. And I think the way you just explained it, that works. I'm not looking for some Rhodes Scholar to come down and give us all a seminar that every American has to go through to understand this concept. I think Americans understand it, don't you?
Yes, ma'am. They understand it very well. And the thing is, it's kind of like what you said a few minutes ago. You said if a Democrat said, hey, we need entitlement reform, even though you classify yourself as a Republican, you said there's no gap for y'all to disagree. But the thing is, when it comes down to the lower level of people, the average everyday person, people will completely look at the sky and tell you what's red just because they don't want to agree with you.
That's true. And
I think it's just.
I think that's what's going on in Congress. I don't think that all of the congressional members disagree with entitlement reform. They just don't want to agree with it because the Republicans are bringing it up.
Yes, ma'am. That is exactly the case right there.
Well, all right. So you, fantastic caller. Thank you for calling in and for listening to the show. I really appreciate your perspective today, especially since you're not coming on partisan like, you're just coming on from the common sense perspective. Hey, we do need this, and it isn't fair when, like you said, there's plenty of stuff I want that I don't have. That doesn't mean I need government assistance. It just means I need to work harder, or I need to sacrifice something else in order to get what I want. It's really simple, and we've been there. Me and my husband have been there when we were younger and first married. Coming out of the military, we had no money, and so we had to make choices, and we had to clip coupons, and we had a really tight food budget, and we made it work. And sometimes we had more than one job. Amazing, just so crazy. I don't even know what we were doing. We should have just had government assistance. Anyway, thank you for calling the show. Appreciate you. So right now we're going to go to our guest, Celeste Katz, senior political reporter for Newsweek. Celeste, thanks for coming on today.
Hey, it's a pleasure to speak to you, Stacy.
It is. So we're supposed to talk about news of the day, and that's cool. But it's the end of the year. And so for the breakdown, because you've been right in the mix, in the thick of things with all the stories, all the different, you name it, you've been there. And you've had your ear to the ground and you had your finger on the pulse of all of the news that's happened this year. So I was wondering if you could give me what you feel like were a few of the most consequential stories, or a few of the most impactful going into 2018. Anything you can give us on kind of running down 2017.
Wow. Well, there was so much. That's a tall order. There was so much going on this year. Obviously, the big story that I think everyone's going to be looking at as we get into the new year is taking a look back at the first 12 months, I guess technically 11 months, of President Donald Trump, and has he delivered on what he promised during the campaign? Has he followed through on what he talked about in his inauguration speech way back on January 20th, I think it was? Very big day for the country. There's been a lot of stuff going on domestically and a lot going on internationally, and I think that people will really be looking to judge him on both. How harshly we will see.
So what about stories as far as like the rest of the country? Obviously, to me, Donald Trump is the biggest story of 2017, but I have a feeling that that's going to be the case every single year that he's the president, because the media's obsession with him and his ability to manipulate the media, those are two factors that aren't going to change. But there have been some other major stories out in the regular world, the world that isn't specifically politics, that I feel like are going to really kind of come back to bite us in 2018, whether we like it or not.
Oh, no question about it. I mean, certainly it has not been entirely a happy year. We've had some terrible, terrible tragedies. Certainly what happened in Las Vegas, for example, that being right up there. I mean, there's the story, always continuing the story of the treatment of veterans, for example, and what's been going on with the VA is something that probably should be talked about a lot more. Again, besides all that, I think I'm so obsessed with politics. Somehow it's hard for me to get out of the bubble sometimes. But obviously, what's gone on with these many cases of sexual harassment and allegations of sexual harassment in politics, in entertainment, in the media, that is a major narrative of the year as well. And I think if you want to talk about a story that's going to have long-term repercussions, I think that is going to be a major one, because
let's
society
unpack
is
that
taking
one a little bit.
a really hard look.
Yeah, I agree, Celeste. And I want to unpack that one a little bit. And when I say, so next year, 2018, we have a lot of things that are going to happen. So do you see a kind of a change or a shift in the way these things are kind of adjudicated out? Like, they have these private investigations and these men are being taken down in very public ways. But we know not every woman who accuses a man of sexual harassment is honest about it. Most are, but there are cases where the men are innocent. Are we going to see men start to fight back and say, look, I need my day in court or my opportunity to be vindicated? Or are we just going to see men continue to fall like dominoes?
Well, I think unfortunately the answer may be some of both. I think I certainly do agree that not every case is an accusation true or provable, and that is especially unfortunate because it's very damaging to people who actually do have a real complaint and do have a real story to tell. People who make spurious allegations are really harmful to the cause of having people behave decently to one another, to behave appropriately, to not make quid pro quo demands in the workplace or anywhere else. What I hope will happen is not only will people be willing to come forward when they have real, true stories of being mistreated by anybody, by coworkers, by family, by anybody, but also that society will take a look at itself and say, after all the stuff that's happened this year, maybe the best thing that can come out of this is not only justice for people who have been harmed, but a different sentiment in society, a real understanding that these are behaviors that are not appropriate in any context, and that whether or not they have been talked about or hidden or denied for a long time, now is the time to say, enough, that people should treat each other with dignity and respect, and this stuff is not okay.
I agree. But I think, do you see this as being something that we need to tackle from the cultural perspective, as in culture for men and for women has changed a lot, and the norms that we now kind of enjoy are part and parcel to what we see in the bad behavior that's from these men in power. Like, so there's behavior that's become acceptable that we need to kind of back off of and say, okay, that's no longer acceptable.
I think so, and I think, a lot of this, I happen to share the view with my father that education is pretty much the answer to everything. And so if you have children, starting from a young age, I'm not talking about, sex education per se, but just teaching common decency, but, the fact that it's not appropriate to touch somebody if they don't want to be touched. It's not appropriate to make comments to people that make them feel uncomfortable about themselves, about how they look, things like that. These things are taught in school, but also in the home, maybe in church or temple, in whatever house of worship it may be. So there could be very much a cultural reckoning there, and perhaps there should be. I think that part of the reason why some of these allegations were so shocking was because for a long time it was not something people talked about. They were afraid to discuss these things. They thought they would not be believed. They thought that the process of exposing somebody for harassment could have negative consequences for them personally, professionally, and otherwise. So I hope that in 2018, I guess the short answer is, I hope we see Americans behaving more decently towards each other as a result of all this horrible stuff we've seen in this last year.
I agree. One of the things that I think, and I'm hoping, is that there'll be more conversations among family members. And I think your stressing about the things with kids at school is important, but kids at school actually get more training about how to treat each other than adults in workplaces do, certainly, because there's always character education in public schools anyway. And I think for parents, this is an opportunity for us to discuss with daughters specifically, but sons as well, what's appropriate behavior and what to do if you are sexually harassed, and the difference between sexual harassment and sexual assault, and what to do in each case. There's an opportunity for us to discuss this with kids, and I'm hopeful that parents don't miss this boat. And I think sometimes we really get like, oh, that could be uncomfortable. Well, which is more uncomfortable? Having a conversation with your kids that some men might think this is appropriate. This might happen to you. If it does, you should do this. Or having to deal with the aftermath of it happening to your daughter and her coming and saying, I didn't know what to do.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think it's frankly, it's a moral responsibility. I mean, in the very same way you would explain to your child, don't talk to strangers, something that simple. If you don't tell your kid not to do that, or tell them, look both ways before you cross the street, something that simple could save them from some serious harm or even worse. So, it doesn't have to be something, graphic, for example, but you just say, if somebody, every family will choose their own way to do this, but if you just explain, if somebody
36.
you or speaks to you in a way that does not feel right, you have to tell somebody.
All right. Well, that's the end of this interview, Celeste. Thank you so much for coming on. I always enjoy your perspective. Happy New Year. Talk to you again in the new year. Very soon. We'll be back with more right after this.
What does it take to live an uncommon life? Here's former Super Bowl winning coach Tony Dungy with today's uncommon moment.
Press on, move ahead. Forget what's behind, whether it's good or bad. Yesterday is done and gone. That was one of the things I always tried to impress upon my teams. No matter what happened on game day, even if it was a devastating last-second loss, by the next night they had to let it go. Focusing on last week's game would not help them prepare for the next one. Where are you today in your journey with Christ? Are you stuck in the past, holding on to grudges, regrets, or feelings of guilt? Release your past by giving it to Christ and press on to reach the heavenly prize of being in His presence forever.
Tony Dungy, author of the popular Uncommon book series. Discover more at CoachDungy.com. That's CoachDungy.com.
Listen to Stacy on the Right with Stacy Washington on Urban Family Talk. She's sharp.
I mean, did you hear that?
Pointed.
Remember that you're not only a Christian on Sunday.
And insightful.
Deception and lies have been accepted as the norm from the Democrats.
But most of all, she's on the right.
That scripture from the Bible that says the heart of the fool inclines to the left just kept popping into my mind.
Stacy on the Right. Now heard weekday afternoons from 2 to 4 Central on Urban Family Talk. Just as David's mighty man Benaiah chased down a lion into a pit on a snowy day, Lion Chasers champions uncommon men and women of faith who are unafraid to stand up and speak truth to power in these dark and evil days. Never before has there been such a need for people of faith to draw a line in the sand with the sword of truth. Lion Chasers, the intersection of faith and public policy with Lonnie Poindexter. Weekday mornings at 10 Central on Urban Family Talk.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, scientist with the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, what kind of life lives in the deep ocean?
Chris, we're just now beginning to explore the deep ocean. Recently, a very exotic form of life was discovered around seafloor vents, where superheated water bubbles out from the interior of the Earth into the cold oceans. There's no light down there, but submarines have discovered much life around these vents. Evolutionists are quick to point out that this must be the kind of life that was the original life billions of years ago, but not so fast. Recent research projects have shown that these pods of life around the seafloor vents are not old in any sense. They may be only a few thousand years old, not billions as required by evolution. And they certainly didn't spring to life from non-living chemicals. If it's living, God created it, and He did so back in Genesis.
To learn more about creation, get our free DVD called That's a Fact. Call us at 800-628-7640 and mention the promo code FACT.
Well, here's what we know. The DNC and Hillary Clinton were paying people to go and pay Russians to tell lies about the president. And I guess the best evidence of collusion against Republicans is that Republicans and Russia were all on the same internet at the same time. It's ludicrous. Why are we not investigating the real crimes of the real criminals? Why aren't we investigating why the DNC's activities with the Fusion GPS company that was employing Bruce Orr's wife, Nellie Orr? That's the real collusion, and it's just outrageous to see this biased Mueller probe continue. I mean, if Bob Mueller were any more biased, we'd have to give him credentials for the mainstream media.
If he were any more biased, he'd have to have credentials for the mainstream media. Oh, yes, he would. So I thought that little bit of audio there, that teensy clip from GOP Representative Gates, and I might be totally butchering his name. His last name is Gaetz. So Gates, probably Gates. He's spot on there. We shouldn't have a situation where we're concerned that someone who's working in government on an investigation is that biased that that person would be better placed in media. And I know there are people out there who believe that Mueller and the whole team, that they're doing their very best work and that we don't have anything to worry about. But I tend to disagree. I don't think that's the case. It's very upsetting that we still have this investigation going on without having anything exposed to us or given to us in the way of truth and facts as to what exactly is going on. What's the evidence? Where are we with this thing? And so what we really need, again, is to have the truth come out, and people aren't looking for anything false. We're not looking for someone to exonerate anyone unless they deserve to be exonerated. And so hopefully we're going to get the truth. And, you know, let's let that be as it may. So other big news, or I don't know if it's big news, but I thought it was amusing, and I wanted to share it with you guys today. So I'm going to read you this news bit. I'm not going to tell you what year or what news outlet it's from, but I want to read it to you so you can have this. It's going to kind of crystallize what the actual movement is. And you'll understand it when I read it to you. It's very short, but it's something that I stumbled across today online social media. And when I read it, I just couldn't. Sometimes you're shocked. Sometimes you can be shocked. Even I can be shocked. As much news as I consume, I can be shocked as well. So listen to this. Grim forecast. Now, let me make sure and set this up properly. This is in a major newspaper here in America, had this as a news item in their general news section. This little blurb right here. Grim forecast. A senior environmental official at the United Nations, Noel Brown, says entire nations could be wiped off the face of the earth by rising sea levels if global warming is not reversed by the year 2000. Coastal flooding and crop failures would create an exodus of eco-refugees, threatening political chaos, said Brown, director of the New York office of the UN Environment Program. He said governments have a 10-year window of opportunity to solve the greenhouse effect before it goes beyond human, and I'm stopping there. What year do you think this was published? In the San Jose Mercury News, California. 1989. June 30th, 1989, this UN climate flunky predicted that entire nations could be wiped off the face of the earth by rising sea levels if global warming was not reversed. Now remember, at that point, they were just entering the Great Pause. And the Great Pause is the time frame we're currently living in, where global warming is not advancing at the same pace that it was. We're actually in a cooling cycle. So remember, it was the Ice Age. In the 70s, they predicted that by now we would be completely frozen over with ice and very few human beings would still exist. Then it started getting warm. And so they predicted that global warming would wipe nations off the face of the earth because the ice caps would melt. And in melting, then we would end up with rising sea levels and life on the coast would be unsustainable. And so nations, coastal nations all over the world, and on the coastal areas of the continent of Africa, you name it, South America, North America, any cities and countries on the coast would be absorbed into the rising sea level. Well, that didn't happen because we had a pause in the global cooling, in the global warming. And so now we don't have the global warming that they thought we would. They keep saying we have these record high temperatures in the summertime, and we have, but we've also had, as we're having right now, we had 60 inches drop on Pennsylvania just yesterday. 60 inches of snow. Now, this is not abnormal. It is not abnormal for 5 feet of snow to fall on a part of the United States on the northern, the northernmost part of the country. It's just not. I mean, look at the kind of snowfalls that they get in Canada. It's really a part of where your city or your state or your country is located on the globe. The closer to the North Pole or the South Pole, I mean, come on. So the equator is where everything's the warmest, and the further away from those you move, the colder it gets, the more snowfall you get. It's really not that tough. I remember getting taught this stuff back in kindergarten. So I just want to say, and this is nothing against people who are concerned about the environment. I am concerned about the environment, and we're heavy duty recyclers. We not only recycle all of our household goods at home, like we separate all the cardboard and paper off, and we recycle, and we pay to do that. We also recycle televisions, batteries, you name it, any component that is recyclable. I even recycle steel. So appliances that are made primarily of steel and copper, we separate the copper out of them and we sell the copper to the steel recycler separately because it's worth more. And then we sell the steel appliance in the bulk steel and we get paid for it, and it's recycling. So please, environmentalists, out recycle me. I dare you. You're not going to match me on having how many appliances you've recycled or your relationship with your local recycler. I know those. I've been down there so many times. I know them. Some people call it scrapping. I call it good business sense. If you have, let's say you go, like when we bought this house, it was filled with old appliances. And we were obviously looking for a way to dispose of them. And one way to do it is to just call a hauler and they come over and they take everything away. And that works. But another way is to take all the seats out of your minivan, lay down a quilt that you're not in love with, and you and your husband and a couple of your handymen hulk those big appliances into the back of your van and drive them down and scrap them yourself. Not only are you saving money by not having to pay a hauler, but they don't go to the landfill. The scrapper actually takes the appliances apart and recycles them into different streams. So this is important. And the reason why I'm bringing this up now is because I just think when we talk about the global warming stories and the recycling and all of these different environmentalist type things, you'll find that the conservatives are really more invested in it. I've never worn an environmentalist t-shirt. I've never been to an environmentalist rally. I've never been big time involved in that kind of activism. But the kind of activism that I practice is if there's something that I have a choice between throwing it away in a landfill or recycling it or donating it to an organization that will reuse it, I always donate or recycle it rather than just send it to the landfill. And I mean, this really, it goes down to every piece of trash, everything that you think you're sending out of your house. I'm not tooting my own horn like I'm some kind of, paragon of virtue. I do it because I'm thrifty and I like saving money. But I'm not an environmentalist. So contrast that behavior, which I'm not unique. Most people I know that I know personally, and most people I interact with on social media are recyclers. So they're recycling what they have so that they can send less things to the landfill. Meanwhile, you have the Dakota Access Pipeline protesters who left $2 billion in trash behind in the wake of their protest. They didn't want the access pipeline to go through, but instead of just using, simple protest methods, they brought in all this garbage and they piled it up high at the site where they were protesting. And then when they left, unlike the Tea Party, unlike conservative activists, they didn't clean things up as they went. They didn't have permits and trash cans placed and trash hauling services engaged to make sure that, because if you're camping out at a site, you're creating a lot of garbage. You're eating to-go food, and all the to-go food comes in paper and plastic containers, and all of those have to go somewhere. Then you have all of the just human waste and detritus, people taking their clothes off and just throwing them on the ground. They literally left $2 billion in cleanup behind them. Meanwhile, you have everyday Americans in their private lives, just like what we do here at this house, recycling and keeping their environments as clean as possible with the resources that are available to us. So where is the activism? I think it's more activism when I take a huge, 36 cubic foot refrigerator from a 40-year-old refrigerator and figure out a way for the four of us to hulk that monster fridge into my minivan and then take it down to the recycling place and turn it over. That's more activism to me than me standing around for 6 or 7 days all stinky and smelly, throwing away my clothes and my plastic containers and all of that because I'm mad because somebody's going to put a pipeline through. A pipeline that I'm going to benefit from because the GDP is going to go up from the jobs and because the oil is moving down through our country, which creates jobs and increases our energy reliance on ourselves, decreasing our energy reliance on hostile actors in foreign countries that don't have our best interests at heart. That's activism. Activism is saying, I'm going to recycle everything from the batteries to the rechargeable batteries. Did you know that Goodwill takes that stuff? Every Goodwill in America, so the Goodwills are run by a Goodwill center that is in charge of all of the Goodwills in your area. And that Goodwill kind of overarching organization for your city will have designated one of the Goodwill donation centers as a recycling center for televisions and batteries. And if you want to recycle those items, you just look it up on your computer, take your stuff there, and they'll even give you a donation receipt that you can use on your taxes. If you itemize, it works out for your tax benefit. But if you don't want that, you just have the good knowledge that instead of sending that, old television that doesn't work anymore to the landfill where it will just pile up and it will never decompose, it's made of plastic, it goes to Mayor's Goodwill. They actually take it and they have people who unscrew the back off and take all of the components apart, and each bit is recycled. The glass, the plastic, et cetera, et cetera. And so that TV lives on as something else later on in the process. You'll never know what it is, but it won't go into the landfill. So I'm just asking, which of those is activism? Which of those is the proper care of the resources that we've been given by God? And I think one of the things that people, you try to separate it all off, but it all works together. God told us to subdue the land, to bring it into submission, and to be caretakers over the garden. Caretaking the garden involves, for instance, the people in California taking proper action to trim back and even, yes, mow down acres of trees and brush. In doing so, in caring for that part of the garden, they prevent the forest fires from burning out of control. This is something that they stopped doing. Decades ago, the environmentalists said, you're tearing down trees, you're increasing CO2. Well, every tree is not something that should be left up for perpetuity. Some trees need to be removed. And when you remove a tree that is dead on the inside, you cut it down, you dispose of the wood. What you're doing is you're making room for new trees, because then you can replant in that same area. You get the stump out, till that land up, and put in, instead of one tree, put 2 or 3 trees right there. At minimum, you can put 1 tree there. It's better than leaving the dead tree there so that it is basically kindling for the next time there's a forest fire. And forest fires serve a purpose. So it's not that we want to completely eliminate all forest fires, but you don't want them to rage out of control and to leave the confines of the forested area and to go, as they have in California, burning down residential areas. But remember, This is the environmentalists. So, I mean, what I look for is for people to just do you, first of all. And second of all, before you start lecturing about the Dakota Access Pipeline, how about you just clean up your own mess? How about you recycle your own batteries in your TV? How about you participate in caring for the garden as God has asked us, commanded us to do? And your refrigerator, and your TV, and your dishwasher, and your ice maker. Recycle all those things instead of putting them in the landfill. Then come at me with your lectures about the environment. I'm still not going to listen, but at least you'll have done your part. We'll be back with more Stacy on the Right tomorrow. I'm in for Abe again today on the Hamilton Corner at 5 p.m. Central. Tune into that, and God bless.
The views and opinions expressed in